The cargo ship Soul's Pride drifted through space like a metal whale swimming in an ocean of stars. Captain June sat in his pilot chair, watching the green and blue planet grow larger on his screen. Kepler 442c looked peaceful from up here, but he knew the human colony down there was running out of medicine. "Are we almost there?" Hana asked from behind him. His 16-year-old sister was supposed to be the ship's communications officer, but really she was just along because she had nowhere else to go. Their parents had died in a transport accident 2 years ago, and June was all the family she had left. "About 3 more hours," June said without turning around. He could hear Bong scratching around in the corner of the bridge. Their pet Honeybadger was always getting into something. They had rescued him from a black market trader who was selling Earth animals to alien collectors. The trader said aliens paid good money for the most fearless creature on Earth. June thought that was funny. If aliens wanted fearless, they should meet his sister. Hana moved to the communications panel and started checking their messages. The colony sent another request. They really need those medical supplies fast. Something about a virus spreading. "We'll get there," June said. "This old ship might not be fast, but she's reliable." That's when the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed across the bridge as June's hands flew over the controls. 3 large ships had appeared on his scanner, coming in fast from behind an asteroid. The ships were big, dark, and covered in spikes. June's blood went cold. "He knew those ships, Vorthak," he whispered. Hana looked up from her station. "The slave traders?" "Get away from the windows," June said, his voice tight with fear. "And pick up Bong." The Vorthak were one of the nastiest alien races in the galaxy. They were tall, gray-skinned, and had faces like angry lizards. They believed that smaller, weaker species were meant to be slaves. Humans were new to space, and the Vorthak thought they made good workers because humans could adapt to almost any environment. The lead Vorthak ship moved in front of Soul's Pride, blocking their path. A deep, rough voice came over the communication system. "Human vessel, this is Warlord Thex of the Vorthak ship Subjugator. Stop your engines and prepare to be boarded." June activated his own communicator. "This is Captain June of the Soul's Pride. We're a medical transport on a mercy mission. We have the right to free passage under Galactic Council law." Harsh laughter came through the speakers. "Galactic Council law means nothing here, human. You are in Vorthak space now. Stop your engines or we will stop them for you." June looked at his sister. Hana was holding Bong close to her chest. The Honeybadger seemed to sense the danger and was making low, angry sounds. "What do we do?" Hana asked. June's mind raced. The Soul's Pride was a cargo ship, not a warship. They had no weapons and no chance of outrunning 3 Vorthak vessels. But he couldn't let them take Hana. He had heard stories about what the Vorthak did to young humans. "Listen to me carefully," June said quietly. "Remember the hidden compartment Dad built behind the engine room? The one he used for smuggling before he went legal?" Hana nodded. "Take Bong and hide there. There's food and water stored inside and an emergency communicator. No matter what happens, don't come out. Do you understand me?" "I'm not leaving you," Hana said, her eyes filling with tears. "You have to." June grabbed her shoulders. "You're the only family I have left. I can't lose you too." The ship shook as the Vorthak fired a warning shot across their bow. "Go. Now." June pushed her toward the door. "Stay hidden no matter what happens. Promise me." Hana looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. She ran from the bridge, carrying Bong in her arms. June took a deep breath and opened the communication channel again. "This is Captain June. I'm stopping my engines now." The Vorthak ship surrounded Soul's Pride like sharks around wounded prey. Through his view screen, June could see the docking tubes extending from the lead ship. Soon, alien soldiers would be stomping through his corridors. 10 minutes later, the airlock hissed open and 6 Vorthak warriors marched onto his ship. They were even bigger than June had imagined, nearly 7 feet tall and covered in gray scales. Their eyes were yellow and cold, and their mouths were full of sharp teeth. Warlord Thex was the biggest of them all. He wore black armor covered in spikes and a long cape that dragged on the floor behind him. When he spoke, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "You are the captain of this vessel?" "Yes," June said, trying to keep his voice steady. Thex looked around the bridge with disgust. "Pathetic. How do humans expect to survive in space with such primitive technology?" "We're just trying to help sick people," June said. "The colony needs these medical supplies." "The colony is of no concern to us," Thex said. "You, however, are. Human slaves bring good prices in the Outer Rim markets. You will come with us." Two of the Vorthak soldiers grabbed June's arms and started dragging him toward the airlock. That's when Thex held up a clawed hand. "Wait. My ship's sensors detected 3 life forms on this vessel when we first scanned it. Where are the others?" June's heart stopped. He had hoped the Vorthak wouldn't notice. "There's nobody else here," he lied. "Maybe your sensors picked up some of the lab animals in the medical cargo." Thex's yellow eyes narrowed. "Do not lie to me, human. I can smell deception like a rotten egg. My sensors do not make mistakes." The warlord turned to his soldiers. "Search every room, every storage compartment, every air vent. Find the other humans, please," June said desperately. "It's just me. I swear it's just me." Thex grabbed June by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "You will tell me where they are hiding, or I will tear your ship apart piece by piece until I find them. And when I do find them, I will make sure they suffer for your lies." The warlord threw June to the floor and gestured to his soldiers. "Take him to the detention cells, and begin the search." As the Vorthak dragged him away, June caught a glimpse of his sister's favorite sweater lying on the floor near the communications panel. His heart clenched with fear. Hana had dropped it when she ran to hide. Thex picked up the sweater and held it to his nose. A cruel smile spread across his reptilian face. "A young female," he said with satisfaction. "They train easier when they're young. Find her." June struggled against his captors, but it was useless. The Vorthak were too strong. As they carried him through the airlock into their ship, he could hear them starting to tear Soul's Pride apart, looking for his sister. The last thing he heard before they threw him into a cell was the sound of metal being cut and torn. The Vorthak were serious about their search. They would find every hiding place on the ship eventually. But June had one small hope. His father had been very good at hiding things. The secret compartment was built into the ship's structure itself, invisible to most scanners. And Hana was smart. She would stay hidden. At least he hoped she would. In the dark cargo hold of Soul's Pride, Hana sat in the cramped, hidden compartment with Bong curled up in her lap. She could hear the Vorthak soldiers moving through the ship above her, their heavy boots making the metal floors ring like drums. She held Bong close and whispered in his ear, "They think they've won because they caught one human. They have no idea what they've just done." Outside the compartment, she could hear the aliens getting closer. But Hana wasn't just hiding anymore. She was planning. And planning was something humans did very, very well. Hana had been hiding in the secret compartment for 6 hours. The space was barely big enough for her and Bong, and it smelled like old metal and engine oil. But it was safe, and that's what mattered. She could hear the Vorthak soldiers moving through the ship above her. They were getting frustrated. She had counted at least 4 different voices, all speaking in their harsh, grinding language. Sometimes they would bang on the walls or tear open storage containers looking for hidden panels, but they hadn't found her yet. Bong was getting restless. The Honeybadger kept trying to explore the small space, sniffing at the air vents and scratching at the walls. Hana held him tight and whispered, "I know, boy. I want to get out of here too." Her father had built this hiding place well. It was tucked behind the main engine housing, in a spot where the ship's scanner couldn't detect it. There was enough food and water for 3 days, and a small computer terminal connected to the ship's main systems. Hana had been using the terminal to listen to the Vorthak communications. Her Korean father had made sure she learned several alien languages, and she understood enough Vorthak to know what they were planning. They were taking her brother to their home planet to sell him as a slave. The trip would take 2 days, and they were planning to destroy Soul's Pride, once they were sure no one else was hiding on it. That gave her maybe 48 hours to save June. Hana pulled up the ship's schematics on the terminal. When the Vorthak had first contacted them, Soul's Pride had automatically downloaded technical information about their ship. It was a standard procedure, meant to help with docking, but now Hana had detailed plans of the entire Vorthak vessel. The ship was called Subjugator, and it was huge. It had 3 levels with detention cells on the bottom, crew quarters in the middle, and the bridge on top. There were 24 Vorthak warriors on board, plus officers and support staff. Hana studied the plans carefully. She was good with computers and technical systems. Her brother always said she was smarter than half the engineers in the merchant fleet. But she was also 16 years old, and the aliens who had taken June were trained killers. She needed an advantage. Bong made a soft, chittering sound, and pawed at one of the air vents. Hana looked at where he was pointing and smiled. The vent connected to the ship's main air circulation system. It was too small for her, but not too small for a honeybadger. "You're right, boy," she whispered. "Time to show these aliens what happens when they mess with our family." Hana opened the vent and attached a small camera to Bong's collar. Then she scratched behind his ears and pointed into the dark tunnel. "Go explore," she said, "but be careful." Bong chittered once and disappeared into the air vent like a furry shadow. For the next hour, Hana watched through the camera as Bong explored the ship's ventilation system. Honeybadgers were amazing climbers and could fit through incredibly small spaces. Bong moved through the air ducts like he had been born there, following the maze of tunnels that connected every room on Soul's Pride. Through the camera, Hana could see the Vorthak soldiers still searching her ship. They had torn apart the cargo bay and were now working on the crew quarters. They looked angry and confused. They knew someone else was on the ship, but they couldn't find any trace of her. That's when Hana decided to give them something to find. She used the ship's computer to access the waste recycling system. With a few commands, she sent a cloud of awful-smelling gas into the air vents where the Vorthak were searching. The aliens started coughing and gagging, stumbling around in the suddenly stinking air. While they were distracted, Bong slipped out of an air vent in the engine room and did what honeybadgers do best. He started breaking things. Bong pulled wires out of control panels, chewed through power cables, and knocked over important-looking equipment. In less than 10 minutes, he had caused more damage than a full engineering team could fix in hours. The Vorthak didn't know what was happening. Their systems started failing one by one. Lights went out, computers crashed, and the ship's artificial gravity started flickering on and off. They thought Soul's Pride was breaking down on its own, but Hana was just getting started. She hacked into the ship's communication system and started playing recordings of scary Earth animals. The corridors filled with the sounds of lions roaring, wolves howling, and tigers snarling. The Vorthak soldiers jumped at every noise, looking around nervously with their weapons ready. Then she turned off all the lights. Soul's Pride went completely dark except for the red emergency lights. The shadows seemed to move and shift, and every corner looked like it might be hiding something dangerous. The Vorthak soldiers huddled together, afraid to separate in the darkness. That's when Bong really went to work. In the dark, the honeybadger was like a ghost. He would appear behind a Vorthak soldier, bite him on the leg, and disappear before the alien could react. The soldiers started shouting and firing their weapons at shadows, but Bong was always somewhere else by the time they turned around. The Vorthak had never seen anything like Bong before. On their home planet, predators were big and loud and easy to spot. They had never dealt with a small, fast, incredibly angry animal that seemed to appear and disappear at will. Within 3 hours, the Vorthak soldiers were calling Bong the Shadow Death and refusing to patrol alone. Hana watched it all through the security cameras and smiled. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time for Phase 2. She opened a communication channel to the Vorthak ship and sent a message directly to her brother's cell. The message was simple. "Big brother, remember what Dad taught us about cornered animals. Phase 2 begins now." On the Vorthak ship, June was sitting in a cold, dark cell when Hana's message appeared on the small screen by his door. He read it and smiled for the first time since his capture. Their father had been in the Korean Special Forces before he became a cargo pilot. He had taught both his children that when escape wasn't possible, you had to make the enemy regret taking you. You had to become more trouble than you were worth. June looked at the camera in the corner of his cell and spoke directly to it, knowing his sister was watching. "Tell me, little sister, how much trouble can one girl and one honeybadger really cause?" Back on Soul's Pride, Hana cracked her knuckles and started typing commands into her computer. On her screen, she had pulled up the schematics for the Vorthak ship's life support systems. "Let's find out, big brother," she said to herself. "Let's find out." The war between one human girl and an entire alien warship was about to begin, and the Vorthak had no idea what they were up against. In the air vents above, Bong chittered softly and headed toward his next target. He had work to do. The Shadow Death was just getting started. Warlord Thek stood on the bridge of Subjugator, staring at the reports from his soldiers with growing anger. In the past 12 hours, his crew had gone from confident warriors to nervous guards jumping at shadows. "Explain to me again," he growled at his second-in-command. How a human child and some small animal have disabled half our systems. Commander Vex shifted uncomfortably. Sir, the creature seems to appear and disappear at will. It has damaged our power grid, contaminated our water supply, and somehow accessed our computer network. 3 of our warriors are in the medical bay with bite wounds and psychological trauma. Vex's yellow eyes blazed with fury. Psychological trauma? From what, a pet? The men are calling it the shadow death, sir. They say it knows things. It appears wherever they are most vulnerable, attacks and vanishes before they can respond. And the human female. She's been leaving messages. What kind of messages? Vex handed him a data pad. She's been hacking our internal communications. Look at what she sent to the mess hall this morning. Vex read the message displayed on the screen. You took my brother. I'm going to make you regret it. Sleep with one eye open. Below the text was a crude drawing of a honeybadger with glowing red eyes. And this appeared in the armory, Vex continued, showing another message. Your weapons won't help you. I'm inside your ship, inside your computers, inside your heads. Give me back my brother or things get worse. Vex crushed the datapad in his clawed hand. She's trying to scare us with childish tricks. Double the patrols. Find this human cub and her pet and end this nonsense. But even as he gave the order, Vex felt a chill of unease. The reports from his crew were getting stranger by the hour. The human girl seemed to know their ship better than they did. She had turned their own systems against them, and that impossible animal of hers was causing chaos throughout the vessel. On Soul's Pride, Hana was putting the finishing touches on her latest project. She had spent 6 hours studying the Vorthak ship's environmental controls, and now she was ready to test her theory about alien psychology. Vorthak, she had learned, were cold-blooded reptiles. They liked their ships warm and humid like their home planet. But they also had excellent night vision and could see heat signatures in the dark. Hana smiled as she typed commands into her computer. Time to turn their strengths into weaknesses. First, she hacked into Subjugator's heating system and cranked the temperature up as high as it would go. Then she flooded the air vents with steam from the ship's water recycling plant. Within an hour, the Vorthak ship was like a hot, steamy jungle. The Vorthak soldiers started sweating and gasping in the oppressive heat. Their armor became heavy and uncomfortable. Moving around the ship turned into exhausting work. But Hana wasn't done. She used the ship's medical supplies to create a cocktail of chemicals that, when mixed with the steam, created a smell that was perfectly harmless to humans but absolutely horrible to the Vorthak sense of smell. Soon the entire ship reeked like rotten eggs mixed with dead fish. The aliens started wearing breathing masks, but that made communication difficult and added to their growing paranoia. Then Hana released Bong for his next mission. The Honeybadger had learned the layout of both ships perfectly. He moved through the air vents like a furry submarine through metal oceans. But now, instead of random sabotage, Hana had given him specific targets. Bong started hunting individual Vorthak soldiers. The first victim was a guard patrolling the lower corridors alone. Bong dropped from a ceiling vent, bit the alien on the ankle, and scrambled back into the darkness before the guard could even shout for help. The soldier found himself alone in the hot, stinking ship with a painful wound and no idea what had attacked him. The second victim was an engineer working on the damaged power systems. Bong appeared from behind a control panel, scattered the alien's tools across the floor, and vanished again. The engineer spent 2 hours looking over his shoulder, convinced he was being watched. The third victim was a cook preparing the evening meal. Bong contaminated the food with engine oil, short-circuited the kitchen equipment, and left a message spelled out in food scraps: "Your brother is mine now." By the end of the day, the entire Vorthak crew was on edge. They moved in groups, carried extra weapons, and looked nervously at every shadow. Their proud warship was starting to feel like a haunted house. But Hana's psychological warfare was just beginning. She had been studying Vorthak culture through their computer databases, learning about their fears and superstitions. The aliens believed in something called the Curse of the Dying. Enemy, a belief that victims of Vorthak raids could somehow reach out from beyond death to torment their killers. Hana decided to become that curse. She hacked into the ship's holographic display systems and started projecting images throughout Subjugator. Ghostly figures appeared in corridors, shadowy humans pointing accusingly at Vorthak soldiers before fading away. Strange lights danced in empty rooms. Doors opened and closed by themselves. The aliens started seeing things that weren't there and hearing voices in empty corridors. Their sleep became fitful and full of nightmares. Some of them began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake by attacking a human ship. In his cell, June was doing his part. During his interrogation sessions, he told his captors stories about Earth's history. He described human soldiers who had fought impossible battles against overwhelming odds. He talked about the Korean War, where his grandfather had held a position against enemy forces for 3 days straight, with no supplies and no hope of rescue. "You think you know humans," June told Warlord Thex during one session, "but you've never seen us when we're really angry. You've never seen what we become when you threaten our family." Thex tried to dismiss the stories as human bragging, but his crew's reports were making him nervous. The human child was systematically destroying his ship from the inside, and that animal of hers had become a legend of terror among his warriors. "Your sister will surrender soon," Thex told June. "She's just a child. She cannot fight trained soldiers forever." June smiled. "You really don't understand, do you? Hana isn't fighting your soldiers. She's fighting your ship, your systems, your minds, and she's winning." That night, Hana launched her most ambitious attack yet. She had been studying the Vorthak sleep cycle and had learned they were most vulnerable during their deep sleep phase. Using the ship's communication system, she began broadcasting subliminal messages throughout Subjugator, whispered threats in the Vorthak language, mixed with recordings of Bong's angry chittering and the sounds of human children crying. The messages were too quiet for conscious minds to understand, but they seeped into the aliens' dreams. The Vorthak crew began experiencing terrible nightmares about being hunted by an unstoppable enemy that could strike anywhere, anytime. They woke up exhausted and paranoid, seeing threats in every shadow and jumping at every noise. By the morning of the second day, Warlord Thex had to face a troubling reality. His crew was falling apart. Half of them were too scared to patrol alone. The other half were so tired from nightmares that they could barely function. His ship's systems were failing one by one, and his medical bay was full of soldiers suffering from what the ship's doctor called severe psychological distress. And somewhere in the maze of corridors and air vents, a 16-year-old human girl and her pet Honeybadger continued their relentless campaign of terror. Thex looked at the reports piling up on his desk and made a decision. He would offer to release the human male in exchange for safe passage. Surely the child would accept such a reasonable bargain. He activated the ship's communication system and broadcast a message to Soul's Pride. "Human child, this is Warlord Thex. I offer you an exchange. Return control of our systems and call off your animal, and I will release your brother unharmed." The response came back within minutes, broadcast over every speaker on Subjugator in perfect Vorthak. "You had your chance for mercy when I asked nicely. Now you get to learn why humans have a saying, 'Mess with the bull, get the horns.' But you didn't mess with a bull, Warlord. You messed with a cub's family." Thex felt his blood run cold as the message continued. "Phase 3 begins now. I hope you're ready because I'm coming for my brother. And I'm bringing my Honeybadger." Throughout the ship, Vorthak soldiers looked at each other with growing fear. The human child wasn't interested in bargaining. She was interested in war, and they were starting to realize they might be losing. The hunt began at dawn, ship time. Warlord Thex had decided enough was enough. He ordered his entire security force to sweep Subjugator from top to bottom until they found the human girl and her pet. 18 Vorthak warriors armed with energy weapons and stun nets spread through the ship in coordinated teams. They had no idea they were walking into a trap. Hana had spent the last day studying their patrol patterns and movement schedules. She knew exactly where they would go and when they would get there. More importantly, she had been preparing surprises for them. The first team entered the cargo bay and immediately ran into trouble. Hana had flooded the room with a mixture of cleaning chemicals that created a thick, choking fog. The Vorthak stumbled around blindly while Bong attacked from the shadows, biting ankles and disappearing before they could react. When the fog finally cleared, 3 soldiers were down with chemical burns and bite wounds, and their equipment was destroyed. The Honeybadger had somehow managed to chew through their weapon power cables and communication devices. The second team tried to search the engine room and found that Hana had turned it into a maze of tripwires and pressure plates. Every step triggered some new disaster. Steam jets blasted from hidden nozzles. Metal panels swung down from the ceiling, and the floor became slippery with leaked coolant. 2 more soldiers ended up in the medical bay with broken bones and concussions. The third team thought they were being smart by checking the air vents first. They sent probes into the ductwork looking for signs of the Honeybadger. What they found instead were explosive charges that Hana had made from medical supplies and power cells. The blast brought down half the ceiling and trapped 4 warriors under twisted metal debris. None of them were seriously hurt, but they were stuck until rescue teams could dig them out. By noon, Warlord Thex had lost half his security force to 1 human teenager and her pet. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his medical officer. "She's just a child. A child who apparently knows our ship better than we do," the doctor replied grimly. "A child who has access to our computer systems, understands our equipment, and has an animal partner that seems to defy all logic." Thex pulled up the security recordings from the failed raids and watched them with growing unease. The human girl moved through their ship like she had designed it herself. She anticipated their tactics, countered their strategies, and always seemed to be 1 step ahead. But it was the Honeybadger that really troubled him. The creature fought with intelligence that bordered on sapient understanding. It targeted weak points in their equipment, exploited flaws in their formations, and somehow knew exactly when and where to strike for maximum effect. "It's like they're reading our minds," one of his officers said. "Don't be ridiculous," Thex snapped. But privately he was starting to wonder if there was more to humans than he had realized. That afternoon, Hana launched her most audacious attack yet. She had been studying the Vorthak crew schedules and had noticed that most of them gathered in the mess hall for their main meal. It was the one time when the majority of the ship's complement was in a single location. Hana waited until 32 Vorthak were sitting down to eat. Then she struck. First, she sealed all the exits to the mess hall using emergency lockdown protocols. Then she filled the room with a gas mixture that was perfectly safe for humans, but caused temporary paralysis in Vorthak nervous systems. Within minutes, 32 alien warriors were sitting helplessly in their chairs, unable to move but completely aware of what was happening to them. That's when Bong made his entrance. The Honeybadger dropped from a ceiling vent into the middle of the mess hall and proceeded to demonstrate why his species was considered the most fearless animal on Earth. He ran from table to table, stealing food, knocking over drinks, and generally causing chaos while the paralyzed Vorthak could only watch. But Bong wasn't just playing. He was working. The Honeybadger systematically destroyed every piece of communication equipment in the room, chewed through power cables, and even managed to access the food preparation computers to contaminate the next 3 days' worth of meals. When the paralysis gas finally wore off, the Vorthak found their mess hall in ruins and their food supplies poisoned. They would have to survive on emergency rations for the rest of the voyage. More importantly, their morale was completely broken. "She made fools of us," one soldier said to another as they cleaned up the mess. 32 trained warriors defeated by a child and her pet while we sat there helpless. Word of the mess hall incident spread through the ship like wildfire. The crew began to whisper that the human girl possessed supernatural powers. Some claimed she could walk through walls. Others insisted her animal was actually a demon from Earth's underworld. Warlord Thex tried to maintain discipline, but he could see the fear in his soldiers' eyes. They were no longer fighting an enemy they could understand. They were fighting something that seemed to operate by rules they didn't know. That evening, Hana made her first direct appearance on the ship's security cameras. She stood in a corridor near the detention level, clearly visible but somehow untouchable. When security teams rushed to her location, they found the corridors empty. She appeared on cameras throughout the ship, always in a different place, always just out of reach. Each appearance was accompanied by a message broadcast over the ship's speakers. "I'm coming for my brother. You can surrender now or you can keep fighting. But either way, I'm taking him home." The messages were delivered in perfect Vorthak, spoken with the confidence of someone who knew she was winning. June, watching from his cell, felt a mixture of pride and worry. His little sister had become something he barely recognized. A ghost in the machine, a nightmare made real. She was systematically dismantling a warship full of trained killers using nothing but intelligence, determination, and one very angry Honeybadger. But he also knew the cost of what she was doing. Each victory was changing her, hardening her into someone who could look at destruction and see only tactics. "What have you become, little sister?" he whispered to himself. The answer came that night when Hana finally made her move toward the detention level. Security teams converged on her location from all directions, but she was always one step ahead. She moved through the ship like water flowing around rocks, slipping past guards and avoiding patrols with supernatural skill. Behind her, Bong cleared the way, disabling security systems and creating diversions. The Honeybadger had learned to work with the ship's maintenance robots, somehow convincing them to help with his sabotage missions. When the first security team finally cornered Hana in a corridor junction, they discovered she wasn't running anymore. She was hunting. The teenager who had been hiding in a cargo compartment 3 days ago was gone. In her place stood someone who moved with deadly purpose, who saw the ship's layout as a 3-dimensional battlefield, and who had turned every system on Subjugator into a weapon. The security team found themselves facing explosive traps, chemical weapons made from cleaning supplies, and a Honeybadger that fought with the intelligence of a trained military animal. When the smoke cleared, 5 Vorthak soldiers were down and Hana was gone, leaving behind only a message scratched into the metal wall. "You took my brother from me. Now I'm taking everything from you." Warlord Thex, watching the security recordings later, felt something he hadn't experienced in 20 years of military service. Fear. The human child wasn't just trying to rescue her brother anymore. She was waging total war against his ship and crew, and she was winning. In the depths of Subjugator, Hana and Bong made their way toward the detention level. They moved through maintenance tunnels and service corridors that the Vorthak had forgotten existed. "Almost there, boy," Hana whispered to her companion. "Just a little further and we get June back." But she knew the hardest part was still coming. Getting to her brother was one thing. Getting him out alive was another. The final battle was about to begin. The detention level of Subjugator was the most heavily guarded part of the ship. 12 Vorthak soldiers stood watch over the corridor that led to the prison cells, armed with heavy weapons and wearing full combat armor. They thought they were ready for anything. They were wrong. Hana struck at exactly 0300 hours when the guards were at their most tired. But she didn't attack the detention level directly. Instead, she attacked everything else. Throughout Subjugator, the ship's systems began failing in carefully planned sequence. First, the main power grid went down, plunging the ship into darkness. Then the artificial gravity failed, sending loose objects floating through the corridors. The air recycling system flooded the ship with thick smoke, and the communication network went completely dead. In the chaos, emergency alarms screamed from every speaker. Crew members stumbled through darkened corridors, trying to reach their emergency stations while floating in zero gravity and choking on smoke. And in the middle of it all, Bong went on the rampage of his life. The Honeybadger had memorized every critical system on the ship. He struck the backup power generators, the emergency communication relays, and the life support monitoring stations. Everywhere he went, essential equipment stopped working. But this wasn't random destruction anymore. This was surgical warfare, designed to isolate the detention level from the rest of the ship. While the crew was dealing with system failures, Hana made her move. She dropped from an air vent into the detention level corridor, landing silently behind the guards. In the darkness and confusion, they didn't notice her at first. That was their last mistake. Hana had spent 3 days learning everything about Vorthak physiology from their medical databases. She knew exactly where to strike to disable them quickly and quietly, using makeshift weapons crafted from medical supplies and ship components. She took down 6 guards before the others even realized they were under attack. The remaining guards tried to raise an alarm, but their communications were dead. They tried to call for backup, but the ship's internal transport system had failed. They were alone with a human girl who had become something far more dangerous than they could imagine. The fight that followed was brief and brutal. Hana moved through the corridor like a shadow given form, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before the guards could react. She used their own equipment against them, turning their weapons into traps and their armor into hindrances. But it was when Bong joined the fight that the guards really understood their situation. The Honeybadger exploded from a wall vent like a furry missile, going straight for the guards' weak points. He chewed through armor joints, tangled weapons in their straps, and generally created chaos that Hana exploited with ruthless efficiency. Within 10 minutes, all 12 guards were down. Some were unconscious, others were too injured to fight, and the rest were too terrified to move. Hana stood in the corridor surrounded by defeated alien warriors, breathing hard, but victorious. She looked down at one of the conscious guards and spoke in perfect Vorthak. "Next time, pick on someone your own size." Then she and Bong made their way to the cells. Jun was waiting for her behind the force field that sealed his prison. When he saw his sister appear in the doorway, his heart filled with pride and sorrow at the same time. The girl who had hidden in the cargo compartment 3 days ago was gone. In her place stood a warrior who had single-handedly defeated an entire warship. But the cost was written in her eyes, a hardness that hadn't been there before, a cold calculation that spoke of terrible choices made in the darkness. "Hello? Big brother," Hana said as she worked to disable the force field. "Sorry I'm late, Hana," Jun said softly. "What have you done?" "What I had to do." The force field flickered and died. "What Dad taught us to do. I protected my family." Jun stepped out of his cell and pulled his sister into a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry you had to become this." "They made their choice when they took you," Hana replied. "Now they live with the consequences." As they made their way back through the ship, Jun saw the extent of his sister's campaign. Subjugator was a ruin. Critical systems were destroyed. Crew members were huddled in emergency shelters, and the proud Vorthak warship drifted powerless in space. "How many?" Jun asked. "All of them," Hana said simply. "I couldn't leave any of them able to follow us." They reached Soul's Pride without meeting any resistance. The few Vorthak crew members they encountered took one look at Hana and fled in the opposite direction. But Hana wasn't finished. Before leaving Subjugator, she uploaded something to their communication systems, a complete recording of everything that had happened, from their capture of June to their defeat at the hands of a human teenager and her pet. "I want the galaxy to see this," she told her brother. "I want everyone to know what happens when you hurt a human family." The recording was broadcast on all emergency frequencies, picked up by ships throughout the sector. Within hours, the footage was spreading across the Galactic Communication Network. The galaxy watched in amazement as security cameras showed a 16-year-old girl systematically destroying a Vorthak warship from the inside. They saw Bong performing impossible feats of sabotage and combat. They heard Hana's messages, delivered in multiple alien languages with perfect pronunciation and absolute confidence. The response was immediate and dramatic. The Galactic Council formally condemned the Vorthak attack on a medical transport and elevated humanity's status within the galactic community. Other species began reaching out to Earth, eager to establish better relations with a race that could produce such determined defenders. The Vorthak hegemony, meanwhile, issued a formal apology to humanity and implemented new protocols. No Vorthak vessel was to engage human ships without explicit authorization from their high command. Unofficially, the order was simpler: avoid humans entirely. Warlord Thex, when he was finally rescued from his drifting ship, spent the rest of his career telling other aliens about the day he learned that humans were not prey. "They look small," he would say. "They look weak. But when you threaten their family, they become something else entirely. Something that will hunt you through the darkness until there is nowhere left to run." The incident became known throughout the galaxy as the Soul's Pride Massacre, or, more ominously, the day the galaxy learned to fear human cubs. Alien parents began telling their children cautionary tales about what happened when you threatened a human family. The phrase Honeybadger protocols entered galactic military terminology, referring to small unit tactics that prioritized causing maximum damage over survival. But for Jun and Hana, the victory came with a price. As Soul's Pride limped toward the nearest space station for repairs, Jun watched his sister stare out at the stars with eyes that had seen too much. She was still 16 years old, but she had been forced to become something no child should ever have to be. "Are you okay?" he asked her. Hana was quiet for a long moment. "I did what I had to do," she said finally. "But I'm not the same person who hid in that compartment 3 days ago." "I know," Jun said. "I'm sorry you had to change." "Don't be sorry," Hana replied. "Be proud. Dad always said family protects family no matter the cost. That's what humans do." She scratched Bong behind the ears. The Honeybadger had curled up in her lap, finally at peace now that his family was safe. The galaxy learned something important, Hana continued. They learned that humans might be small and we might be new to space, but we're family. And family protects family. Months later, when alien customs officials saw Sol's Pride on their scanners, they waved the ship through without inspection. When pirates heard the ship's identification codes, they found somewhere else to be. The galaxy had learned its lesson. You could attack human ships. You could threaten human colonies. You could even capture human crews, but you should never, ever corner a human cub or their Honeybadger, because that's when you discover that the most dangerous predator in the galaxy isn't the biggest or strongest. It's the one with nothing left to lose and someone to protect. And humans, the galaxy learned, would do absolutely anything to protect their family. The legend of Sol's Pride lived on, told in bars and spaceports across the galaxy, and every time someone told the story, they ended it the same way. Remember, when you see a human ship on your scanners, you're not just looking at a crew, you're looking at a family, and families fight back. The galaxy learned to give human ships a wide berth after that. Some lessons, after all, only need to be taught once.